And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I made a video earlier this year that got a little bit of attention talking about how I might stop buying new Magic cards. And I did say might, for those who don't know and for those who actually care. I did buy Magic cards after that, not many though, and I will get to essentially my conclusion of where I will be going with all of this moving forward, and especially in the next year. I thought it would be a good idea, though, to go over all the cards I bought this year, right? This is a year that, for me, actually was a really not very good year for Magic. You know, for me personally, I'm not saying it was a bad year for Magic the Gathering. For me personally, I didn't love a lot of the stuff that came out this year. I was pretty critical. I was mostly critical of Modern Horizons 3 because of the power creep and the very obvious Commander auto includes. And I just don't love the constant upgrades to our decks that are becoming necessary. Again, as I said in that video, they're basically turning Commander into a rotating format, which I don't love. I would rather be putting new decks together than constantly having to be buying new cards to shoehorn into my already existing decks. As far as the sets go this year, I wasn't a big fan of really any of them. I thought the aesthetics were very weird on a lot of them. Not a big fan, and I think a lot of people will agree on that. I will mostly, though, be talking about the cards I bought and where I eventually got. Again, I made that video, and this is sort of a follow-up to the video. Where did I actually go this year with regards to buying new cards? I will begin at the start of the year, of course, which was Murders of Karlov Manor, and this is actually a set that a lot of people were critical of. It apparently didn't sell very well, and for me, I actually got quite a few cards from this set. It actually, I think, was my favorite set of the year, and aesthetically speaking, again, I didn't love it. A lot of people didn't. The detectives and the clue theme, all of that, I didn't love, but as far as the actual cards go, you know, they fit nicely into the Magic universe, most of them. And also, there was a lot of great cards that have become Commander staples. So Demand Answers, I got a couple of copies of that, put them in a couple of decks. As I said, I thought this would be one of, if not the most popular card from the entire set, and it has been. Also got a few copies of Archdruid's Charm. I think I got 3 in total. It is all around just a great card. Obviously, it's tutoring, it's removal, it's doing a whole lot of stuff. I mean, I have a couple of decks where I'm very specifically searching for certain lands and creatures, but even more so lands that this went in. And this also just went in my mono green deck because it's just a really good utility modal card in a mono green deck. Got Conspiracy Unraveler for my, what used to be my Drownu deck is now my Ghost and Armix deck because it's doing the graveyard thing quite a bit. It's actually a really powerful card later in the game if you're filling your graveyard. By the way, I won't be reading any of these cards because this video will take 3 hours if I do. Call a Surprise Witness I got as well from Murders of Karlov Manor, which was a slam dunk in my Shanna deck. And the reason why is because, of course, I'm sacrificing my commander a lot and I can get it back from the graveyard with this, but also puts a flying counter on it. And that's sort of a vanilla big creature. And so giving it evasion like that is just perfect for that deck. So of course that went in there. Lost in the Maze, as I talked about, is just maybe the only card I've ever seen that looks like it was printed specifically for my Abishon deck. So of course I had to get it for that, right? Just an absolute perfect fit in that deck. Prof's Eidetic Memory is a really interesting card that I believe I also threw in my Abishon deck because, I mean, the maximum hand size is very helpful. I get into situations where I do draw a whole bunch of cards all at once. But then, you know, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you've drawn more than one card this turn, put X counters on target creature you control for X the number of cards you've drawn. So if I can draw 8 cards, and again, this is a card that fits in a ton of decks. If you're in one of those decks where you're just drawing lots of cards and you don't really have so much as of a win con, like Psychosis Crawler is another card I have in there that I put in as a way to help me win, because basically that's all I do in the deck is I tap creatures and I draw cards. And so I needed some ways to win, and Psychosis Crawler I put in there for that reason, but Prof's Eidetic Memory was another one. I'm like, okay, I can, on combat, pile a bunch of counters on one of my creatures and swing with it. So I threw that in there for that reason as well. Unyielding Gatekeeper is a pretty decent removal spell. It also blinks. I really like this guy a lot. He's a very versatile creature, and I ended up putting him in 2 decks. I put him in my Shanna deck because that's just a creature-heavy deck in general where I want to be doing things in creature form. And I put him in my Dennick deck, I believe, because very similar reason. Undergrowth Recon went in my A Name is One deck because it's a bit of a lands theme. Obviously, Command Beacon being the most important card. Probably the most important card in the entire deck because I need my commander in my hand. And this will just get it back from the graveyard repeatedly, or any other land for that matter. Of course, the Surveil lands is the big one. And again, a lot of people sort of poo-pooed on Murders of Karlov Manor, and I actually thought it was a pretty good set. It might have been the best set this year. The Surveil lands are a big one. Everyone's playing these, I believe. They have the land types. They also surveil. I'm putting these lands in so many decks. They're one of my favorite land cycles in the entire format now. After that, we got Fallout, and I'm not the biggest Universes Beyond guy, and I know absolutely nothing about Fallout, but I did grab a few cards. Eddie, Lonesome Eyebot being probably the most important one for me because it is an actual commander for one of my decks. My colorless deck, which was my Omarthus deck, I swapped to Eddie because I thought it was a better commander with what I was doing. So I have a Universes Beyond commander now for one of my decks. I also got Diamond City for the exact same deck, my Eddie deck, because it's doing shield counters, put it on, whatever I want. And also that's a proliferate deck. So obviously that works there. I also got Vats, which again, a lot of people are using this. As much as you don't like Fallout or Universes Beyond, this is a pretty great removal spell. It is a split-second removal spell, right? We don't see many of those. And I also got Screeching Scorch Beast for my Ghost and Armex deck because, again, it just is doing a very unique thing, right? The cards that I grab now are going to be cards that are just doing this very unique thing. And in fact, I didn't buy any Fallout cards when it first came out. All the cards that I ended up buying, like I switched to Eddie later in the year, maybe in the summertime. Screeching Scorch Beast, I ended up grabbing later in the year again because I just stumbled across it. I didn't really give Fallout a particularly good look, but I saw it and I'm like, okay, well, whenever one or more non-land cards are milled, you may create that many 2/2 black zombie mutant creature tokens. That's amazing in any mill strategy, even if you're in a self-mill strategy. So I ended up throwing it in my Ghost and Armex deck because, again, that's, I have a couple alt win cons in that deck. Sometimes I can have troubles closing out games, and this is a great way to do it. So I did get a decent amount of cards from Fallout. Outlaws of Thunder Junction, got a bunch of cards from that set too, even though I wasn't a big fan of the aesthetic. Everyone wearing a cowboy hat. I even don't like the set symbol, the cowboy hat. Don't like that either, but that's nitpicky. I love Even Interrupter. This is one of my favorite cards of the entire year, which I will be talking about pretty soon in my best cards of the year video. Just a really unique creature. I love abilities stapled on creatures. You can reuse them, blink them, get them back from the graveyard, all of that. I believe this in 3 decks of mine. Really, really great creature. Also got Boombox for my colorless deck because I think it is a decent colorless removal option, destroying an artifact, creature, and land. Not bad. I'd love if there was an enchantment removal on here, but artifact, creature, and land, not bad. Got Claim Jumper, and of course, again, a lot of people did. I actually had this in a couple of decks originally and took it out. Now I only have it in 1. It's pretty good. It's definitely pretty good. I found that I wasn't getting 2 lands off of this very often. It does happen in the right situation, but getting only 1 land off of this doesn't feel super great. It's still pretty good. It is a Plains card. It's definitely a great option for white with the ramping, but as I say all the time, we got so many great options for white with ramping now that the catch-up wrap is getting not as good because we're not catching up nearly as much in white anymore, but still a good card. Magebane Lizard, I just love cards like this. Just whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, it deals damage equal to the number of non-creature spells they've cast this turn. Symmetrical effect that's throwing damage around. I love cards like that. And I just threw this in my Brelin deck just because I wanted to play this card. I think it's a neat card, and it fit in the non-combat damage theme of my Brelin deck, so I threw it in there. Fleeting Reflection, another card that I just really liked from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Again, I didn't love the aesthetic of the set, but they had a lot of really neat cards, and this was certainly one of them. This card is giving a creature hexproof. It's untapping it, and it's turning it into another creature. If you want to do any of those or all of those, this is going to do that for you. It's a really neat card that you can do a lot of different tricks with in a commander game. I threw this in my Abishon deck, I think, just because I wanted to try it out in a deck, so I threw it in there. My Abishon deck is sort of the deck where I have lots of room to try out cards like this, so it's one of the reasons why I love that deck so much, and threw this in there because I think it's a neat card and I wanted to use it. Ruthless Lawbringer is the final card I got from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Again, I had a lot of cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Of course, this was before Modern Horizons 3, so it was before the video I made about not buying any new cards. I was actually buying a lot of new cards before Modern Horizons 3 came out. I bought a bunch from Murders of Karlov Manor, I bought a few from Fallout, and I bought a bunch from Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And that's when we get to Modern Horizons 3, and that's where everything changes for me. I just felt overwhelmed, and I just felt, again, I had bought in so many cards already this year. And I talk about the auto includes and the cards that are clearly being printed for Commander and the very stapley stuff, the stuff that is, the modal cards. They're doing that a lot. Like every set now has the modal cards where here's a bunch of modes that you want to do in every Commander game. So it's really easy to slot it into your deck because at any point those modes, and they're right, that is a good thing to slot in your deck because you never know what your opponents are going to be doing. I talk about it all the time, but it's getting to be too much. The MDFCs, hey, why not just take out a basic land and put that MDFC in because it's also a removal spell in the back, right? It's just getting to be too much, and I think they shot themselves in the foot by putting too much of the auto includes and the stapley stuff all in one set. So I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to turn my Commander decks into, I'm not going to turn this into a rotating format where I'm constantly upgrading. And as I said in that video, there's just going to be another one, guys. We're just going to get another card a couple of sets from now that's going to be even better than the one you just put in your deck. I got a lot of cards sitting in my box right now that I thought were going to be Commander staples forever. And in like a year, I ended up taking them out of all my decks. I don't want to keep doing that. However, a few months go by, and in fact, I actually bought some Assassin's Creed cards first, which I will get to. And then I went back and Flare of Fortitude, which I thought was maybe the best card from the set, and again will be in my best of the year video. Man, I almost think this might be better than Teferi's Protection. I mean, it is better than Teferi's Protection in certain situations because, of course, it can be free. And a card that your life total can't change and gives your permanents hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, that effect, being able to do it for free, is super, super important. Even better than a counterspell, in my opinion. I think this is maybe the best card from the set, and nobody was playing it. I thought it was gonna be like a $30 or $40 card. It was like a $5 card or something. I think it was about a $6 card when I saw it, and I'm like, you know what? I think this is the best card from the set. It doesn't look like anyone's going after it. And I also have two decks that it is an absolute slam dunk. Again, my Shanna deck, because that's a sacrifice theme. I have tons of white creatures lying around all the time that I can sacrifice. It's such a slam dunk there. And my Dennick deck, which is very similar. I want to sacrifice my commander. At the worst case scenario, it's instant speed, for free. I sack my commander, right? It's an instant speed sack outlet for free, which is pretty darn good, of course. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'll grab a couple copies. So I grabbed two for my Shanna deck and for my Dennick deck. And then a few weeks go by and it drops even lower in price. I mean, it's currently like a $3 card. I don't get why nobody's playing this. And again, after I started using it, I realized it's even better in practice than I had originally thought. And I also put my AO deck together in paper this year, which it is also, of course, an absolute slam dunk because there's another commander I want to be sacrificing. So I'm like, I guess I'll grab another copy for that deck. So I bought 3 copies of this card for my decks. So I did actually buy some Modern Horizons 3 cards this year. And as it happens, again, later in the year, and I already made a video talking about Lazotep Quarry, I stumbled across this card and I didn't even realize it was a Modern Horizons 3 card because, of course, it has the Modern Horizons 3 Commander symbol on it. I just saw it. I stumbled across it and I was like, wow, this card seems amazing. And of course, I gush over it in that video for about 10 minutes if you want to go check that out. It's just a free sack out on the land. That's the really important part. And of course, this also went in my AO deck and a lot of all those other decks where I want to be sacrificing creatures. I mean, it's great in that situation. And of course, I grabbed a bunch of copies. I think I got 3 copies of this as well, maybe 4 in decks. So this would be the other card. And then after the fact, I realized, oh, it's a Modern Horizons 3 card. Okay. So I ended up getting, I guess, 2 different cards from Modern Horizons 3 this year. But I'm sticking to my guns on avoiding the power creep and the auto includes. And here's just a modal card that does all these things. I'm trying to stay away from that stuff, right? The MDFC lands, I didn't buy any of those. I'm trying to stay away from that again. I'm sort of putting up a fight against the whole MDFC land thing as well. We're just taking more and more lands out of our decks and replacing them with MDFC lands. I just don't think that's a good road to go down either. So these are the cards I bought from Modern Horizons 3. And then after that, of course, we got Assassin's Creed, and I actually bought more cards from Assassin's Creed than I did from Modern Horizons 3. Again, that was a set that a lot of people poo-pooed on and didn't like it very much. I thought there was some pretty neat cards, and I actually thought that the Assassin's Creed stuff fit in the Magic universe better than a lot of the regular Magic the Gathering stuff, despite the fact that it was Universes Beyond Saturday. A lot of these cards look perfectly fine. Like Smoke Bomb, I loved that card. I thought it was very unique and interesting. I just grabbed the copy for my colorless deck because I thought I could put in some work there. And I'm looking at this card, and I know if you're familiar with Assassin's Creed and the hood and everything, sure, it looks like an Assassin's Creed card, but if you're not familiar with Assassin's Creed, then it just looks like a normal Magic card to me. Even more the case Hunter's Bow, which is a slam dunk in my Questing Beast deck. Again, I had to get this for my Questing Beast deck because it enters the battlefield and you attach it to a creature, and then that creature deals damage equal to its power to another target creature, which is exactly what that deck is doing, and also gives my Questing Beast reach and ward too. Pretty fantastic. Looks like a Magic card, doesn't look like Universes Beyond at all, right? So I actually thought the Assassin's Creed stuff fit in the Magic universe pretty well. Mjolnir, Stormhammer, maybe a little less so, again, if you're familiar with the lore of where this comes from. But other than that, it still just looks like a normal Magic card. Of course, this is another card. I put a lot of cards in my Abishon deck this year, I'm realizing. I mean, it fits perfectly with the tapping of my opponent's creatures theme. So again, a deck that I'm having a little trouble closing out games sometimes, and this is a way that can help me close out games. And I got yet another card from Assassin's Creed. I actually got a decent amount of cards from Assassin's Creed, Abstergo Entertainment, which again I talked about in my Utility Lands video a couple of weeks ago, and this is a pretty fantastic one. It's doing a couple of different things that a lot of decks want to do. It's graveyard hidden a land, which of course every deck needs, and then also you can get a historic card out of your graveyard with it as well, which can just be your commander or can be any other important legendary saga artifact in your deck. Pretty great land. I put it in a couple of decks as well. Then we get to Bloomborough, and I didn't like Bloomborough, guys. I know a lot of people did. I didn't love it. I just thought it was a little too, I don't know, what's the term I'm looking for? It seemed like a Disney cartoon or something to me. It was like, you know, the Secret Rats and Nim. Anyone familiar with that? That's what it reminded me of. Little mice running around with swords and stuff. That's sort of what it reminded me of. I didn't love the aesthetic. It was okay, but I didn't love it. I didn't love a lot of the mechanics as much as most people did. A lot of the mechanics I was like not a big fan of. The gift mechanic I was not a big fan of. And despite the fact that I was not a big fan of it, the only card that I actually bought from Bloomborough was Starfall Invocation, because again, it was such a perfect fit in my AO deck. It's really a perfect fit in a lot of decks. You're going to destroy all creatures, and if the gift was promised, return a creature card put into your graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So this really is like a Dune Blast or one of those effects where I get to keep one creature and everything else gets blown up. But it's even better if your commander has a dice trigger like my AO does. So man, this is a slam dunk. It's the only card I got from Bloomborough. And again, where I ended up deciding to stick to, and I have gotten other cards. I will point out there are other cards that I have purchased. I'm only talking about the cards here that I'm actually using, because if you purchase a card and you don't actually use it, then it doesn't really matter a whole lot, right? It's not exactly a glowing review of that card if you buy a card and then never use it, right? These are the ones that I'm actually using in my decks right now, so I will point that out as well. There was a couple other cards I got from Bloomborough that I did not actually end up using. This is the only card from Bloomborough that I am currently using in a deck. And going forward, I think what I will end up doing is just picking out that one card from the set that I really like, and I'll just buy that card, and that's it. I don't want to feel overwhelmed anymore by all the cards we're getting and all the commander staples and auto includes. Duskmourn, of course, is another set that I wasn't the biggest fan of. The aesthetic wasn't a big fan of. Again, mechanics, stuff like that. I won't get too much into it. You can go watch my review of that set. But of course, as I have talked about quite a bit recently, you got to play the board wipes that benefit you, and Split Up is just such a fantastic board wipe. It's just a 3-mana board wipe for one, and being able to hit probably likely most of your opponent's creatures and not yours is just such a massive advantage. And it's even more of an advantage if you're in that theme already, which I am in my Lulu deck. So of course, I had to grab a copy of this for my Lulu deck. It's just a perfect fit in that deck, and I had to put it in there. But that's the only card I got from this set. And of course, we got Foundations, the last set of the year, and everyone was a big fan of this set. And I would say I also was a pretty big fan of this set. There are definitely some things about it I don't love. I honestly think that Murders of Karlov Manor, though, is still probably my favorite set of the year. If we're just looking at the actual individual cards that I like, the cards that I grab from my decks, if we're not talking about the aesthetic, if we're not talking about all the little nuances that are involved in everything, if we're just talking about cards, my favorite cards from this year, I think likely mostly came from Murders of Karlov Manor. Foundations had some good ones, and I was really, really close to buying a Blasphemous Edict. And I was thinking, yeah, but do I need to? Why am I buying this? I actually had it in my cart and I was thinking about it because it's a good board wipe, great board wipe, sure. But I'm not going to buy cards anymore just because they're good cards. That's where I'm drawing the line. I'm not going to buy cards just because it's a really good card or it's an auto include or it's a better version of whatever. I'm only going to buy the cards where I think I need it for my decks. So when it comes to cards like a Blasphemous Edict that, yeah, it's going to be a staple in the Commander format forever. It's a fantastic board wipe, but I got lots of fantastic board wipes, right? I was going to grab one copy and I was like, okay, well, where am I going to put it? I probably put it in my mono black deck. That's probably the deck where it would be most needed, but I really have no problem getting rid of creatures in my mono black deck. I don't think any mono black deck would, right? Is there any black deck in the format that has issues getting rid of creatures? No, not at all. Lots of sacrifice effects already that exist. Depending on what your deck is doing, it could be easier or harder for you. I still think a Toxic Deluge is a better board wipe than is a Blasphemous Edict. And of course, I got that in there. I don't need it. So I'm not going to get one because I don't really need it. And I kind of want to limit myself to maybe one card per set that I will be grabbing. Again, Raise the Past was another one. I was like, I'm going to grab this for my decks. I said that in the Foundations video, and I just thought, yeah, I don't need it though. I already have a ton of effects. Even if that's doing it better than the effects I already have in there, I already got a lot of effects. Return to the Ranks is essentially doing the exact same thing. And yes, Raise the Past could be better, but Return to the Ranks also could be better because it could be free. So yeah, I don't need it. Why would I get it if I don't need it? It's not doing anything unique or interesting. It's not doing anything that I absolutely need to do in that deck. I'm already doing it a whole bunch. And it's not doing anything I've never seen before. It's just doing more of the same. So I'm not getting that card either. I'm not getting any of these cards that are just doing more of the same that I'm already doing in my decks. Why do I need to do that? If it's just a slightly better version, I don't think I need to do that either. So the card that I will be getting, the one card I will be getting from Foundations, which funny enough, I didn't talk about at all in that video, Ravenous Amulet. 2 mana artifact, pay 1 and tap, sacrifice a creature, draw a card, and put a soul counter on this artifact, activate only as a sorcery. So decent draw option, decent sack outlet. It is as a sorcery, but still, sacrificing creatures and drawing cards, great. Also, you can pay 4 and tap, sacrifice this artifact. Each opponent loses life equal to the number of soul counters on this artifact. So you can sit there sacrificing creatures for a few turns and then have your opponents lose some life. But it's extra good because, of course, it's using counters in my Eddie Ibot deck because that is a proliferate theme. It's a perfect fit there because I can just proliferate the counters on this guy. So it is, again, another sort of alt win con using counters, which is exactly what that deck is doing. I didn't think of it at first, but as I was looking at the card, I was like, it's a pretty good sack outlet. Maybe I want to put it in a deck. And I think I might grab a couple copies and put this in another deck. Again, I have a lot of decks that are sacrificing as it happens. So I might grab a couple copies. Obviously, it's not a very expensive card. And I'll put a few of them in maybe a couple of my decks, but for sure I'm going to put one in my Eddie deck because it's just going to help me close out games. And I think that's it. I think likely, again, moving forward, who knows? Maybe 6 months from now, I'll look back at Foundations or Duskmourn or Bloomburrow and find some card that fits perfectly with what I'm doing in the deck that I'm currently making, and I might grab another card. But for now, I'm not going to just have a new set come out and go, all these cards that I want to grab, right? Again, I put like 5 or 6 cards in my cart that I wanted to get from Foundations, and I'm like, do I really need all these? I don't really need a Blasphemous Edict. I got lots of black board wipes. Maybe this one's better than some of them, but I don't really need it. Don't really need that card. Don't really, right? I started knocking cards off because I already have lots of cards that already do that very same thing. So I don't really need to replace them necessarily. I'm getting Ravenous Amulet because it's doing something very unique, something that I don't think we really have. Certainly something that I can't put in my Eddie deck. I don't think we have that in a colorless option. And that's really the only cards that I'll be getting going forward from sets. And, I will talk about going forward, how that's going to work for me. And, there's a lot to talk about here with regards to Magic and Commander and all of that going forward. And this is sort of a preemptive video to a few more that I will be talking about. Again, I wanted to revisit that, right? I have a lot of people that watch that video about how I'm not going to buy any new Magic cards. I did buy a few, but I'm definitely ramping it down hugely. You can tell from all the cards I bought in the first half of the year to the handful of cards I bought after Modern Horizons 3. And I certainly don't think that's going to change going forward. Again, I will talk about this in my year-end review, but looking at what they've talked about with what's going on next year with, the Universes Beyond and all the stuff like that, it's likely that sticking to maybe buying one card per set is probably not going to be very difficult for me. Mostly though, I'm just sick and tired of constantly pulling cards out of my decks. And it's been 3 minutes and we got another new set and there's about 80 Commander staples in that set that I got to run out and buy. And I was literally taking cards out of decks that I had not even played yet. That's the part that I don't love. I grab a card from a set and I put it in my deck. And then 3 months later, before I actually play that card, I mean, maybe I've played the deck, but I didn't actually play that specific card. And now I'm like thinking, maybe I'll take this out and put this, like, no thanks. I'm not doing that anymore, right? I am not going to accept turning Commander into a rotating format. I won't be part of it. So I think more and more I'm just going to stop buying new cards, and more I'm going to be just leaving my decks the way they are. I probably have a few decks now that likely will never take cards out of again. That's how I'm doing it moving forward. You guys let me know how you're going to do it moving forward. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.